Greetings, music fans. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. I am the host of Mostly Metal on the media juggernaut of WVLP in Valparaiso, Indiana at 103.1 FM. If you happen to be in Valparaiso, that's where you can get it. If not, WVLP.org streams all over the place. Welcome to my basement. These ranking and top 10 videos that lots of people are doing are the modern equivalent of, hey, come to my house and look at my record collection. So I've been jumping in recently. My last video was ranking Black Sabbath albums. There were a lot of those. Today I'm going to tackle something a bit simpler, which is ranking the albums by Threshold, the British progressive melodic metal band. They have 11 discs, so this will be quite easy. And in fact, since I don't have a whole lot of commentary about the albums, I'll see how long this takes. I might sneak in a top 10 of Threshold songs at the end of this, or perhaps make it a separate video. We'll see how that goes. But my job today is to tell you my order of personal preference for the 11 CDs released by Threshold. Threshold has had an interesting history. They've bounced around between 3 different vocalists, and there have been other bands that have 3 vocalists, and for those bands normally there's one vocalist for CDs 1 through 4, say, and then a new vocalist for 5 through 8, and a third vocalist after that. Well, Threshold has kind of played hopscotch with vocalists through their careers, as you're going to see. Damian Wilson started in the band with their debut album Wounded Land. Glyn Morgan came in after that, and then Andrew McDonald, otherwise known as Mac. He sort of held steady through that middle area of Threshold's history, but the early and later eras, there's quite a lot of motion in and out in terms of who's singing for the band. I tend to prefer the latter-day Threshold. Their first vocalist, Damian Wilson, there are some songs where he's just absolutely perfect for them, but in other cases, his voice just sometimes sounds a little too shrill for me. He's not a screamer or anything. It's just the tenor of the voice sometimes isn't as smooth or whatever. I don't know how to describe it. But if I have to pick my favorite of the 3 vocalists, it would be Mac, and then Glyn Morgan, and then Damian Wilson. And you might see that echoed in my list of preferences. So this is my grabbing order for Threshold CDs. When it's time to listen to Threshold, which ones am I least to most likely to want to listen to on any given day? And we'll start with number 11, Extinct Instinct. This was their 3rd disc with Damian Wilson on vocals. It was released in 1997. It's my least favorite one. There are some good songs on it. Virtual Isolation. Clear is an example of a song that Damian Wilson just really shines on. Part of the Chaos is one of the longer, more progressive tracks on that album. If you like good 10-minute songs with lots of time changes and different paces and different choruses and things like that, there's at least one on each Threshold album that you can really sink your teeth into, and Part of the Chaos helps out on Extinct Instinct. Coming in at number 10 would be Clone. This was released in 1998. This is the first disc that Andrew McDermott sang on. Angels is a good track. Change is a nice mellow tune. The Latent Gene is the 10-minute monster that comes off of this track, which is very, very good. My own history with the band was I discovered Threshold when they released an album called Hypothetical. You'll hear about that in my list quite a bit later. It's one of my favorites. Clone is the one that was released right before that. And so I didn't hear Clone first and then Hypothetical. I heard Hypothetical first, and that set me a standard that Clone didn't live up to when I finally got to hear it after the fact. So Clone overall, it doesn't have, to me, as many good melodic moments and crunchy bits that really get to me the way some of the other discs do. Number 9 would be their debut, Wounded Land. I may be odd man out in terms of my preferences for Threshold. Like I said, I prefer mid to latter era Threshold. The earlier stuff it's a little more proggy, probably a little more rough around the edges, and some people probably prefer these earlier discs. I'm not one of them. Sanity's End opens this, and it's a good opening track for Threshold because it really sets the stage for what they're about to do. Paradox, Shifting Sand, Surface to Air, those are all good tracks off of this. Number 8 is Critical Mass from 2002. This is a disc where Mac does the vocals. This is the one that came out after Hypothetical. So again, possibly my standards were too high based on my appeal of Hypothetical. So to me, Critical Mass doesn't stand up as one of their super best. Phenomenon's a great track. Choices, Falling Away is amazing. Mac does a terrific job there. Echoes of Life. And I don't know that I mentioned, but Andrew McDermott passed away, I believe, in the early 2000s. So it's been at least 10, possibly 15 years. I don't remember what year exactly, but that was a terrible loss to the music world. Coming in at number 7, Psychedelicatessen from 1994. This was their second disc. So Damian Wilson started off on Wounded Land, and then Glenn Morgan came in on Psychedelicatessen. Attention of Souls, He Is, I Am, Innocent are great tunes. There was a remaster, a kind of deluxe edition of this CD released later on. It's been some years since the remasters came out, I believe. One of the bonus tracks that got stuck in there is called Halfway Home, and that's one of my favorite tracks on that album overall, as well as one of my favorite Threshold tracks all in all. So it's interesting that it ended up being a bonus track there. I don't know what the decision process is, but it was a great song. I wish they hadn't left it off in the first place and made me wait between when I very first heard Psychedelicatessen and when the remasters came out to finally hear it. Okay, I'm going to do my sneaky lean forward to change my screen bit here. I've got a screen right behind the camera so I can kind of follow along and not have to remember all these details. By the way, I'm drinking hot tea in my cup. It's sort of fading, but it's one of these temperature sensitive cups. It's got the metal horns right there in front, so when it's filled with hot liquid, like my hot tea here, possibly mixed with something else, I'm not telling, but the metal horns show up, and then as the drink cools off, the design fades away. So depending on how long I yap here, it may disappear before the end. Okay, moving on. I don't know if I'm in exactly the same spot that I was in before I had to lean forward, but you can see me. So number 7 had been Psychedelicatessen. Number 6 in my grabbing order for Threshold is For the Journey. This is the second most recent disc, released in 2014. Damian Wilson back on vocals. So this is after, unfortunately, Mac had passed away. Damian Wilson came back in. This wasn't his first disc in his return to the band, but he sang on 2 after Mac was no longer there. For the Journey has key songs like Watchtower on the Moon. The Box is terrific. It's another one of those 10-minute long songs. Starts out nice and mellow and then kicks in with some great choruses. The Mystery Show, and another example of a bonus track that ends up being one of the best tracks, at least for me, on the album, called I Wish I Could. Number 5 is Subsurface. This is the second to last disc that Mac sang on. Mission Profile is a kick-ass song to lead it off. The Art of Reason is a fabulous 10-minute track. Pressure is a heavy tune, probably maybe one of the heaviest on there. Flags and Footprints has really good chorus to it. Love listening to that song. Number 4, March of Progress from 2012. So this is the first disc that Damian Wilson sang on once he rejoined the band. This is my favorite of the Damian Wilson discs by far. And favorite songs: Ashes, Staring at the Sun, The Long One, Liberty, Complacency, Dependency. The Hours is one of my favorite Threshold tracks altogether. It's a mellow tune, but the chorus is great. And Don't Look Down also is a standout there. All right, for my top 3. Number 3 in my top 3 is their most recent release, Legends of the Shires. I don't know that I've heard any songs about hobbits on the album, but it is what it is. It's a double CD, which is nice these days. It was released in 2017. Glenn Morgan back on vocals. Small Dark Lines is an amazing song that comes off of this pair of discs. The Man Who Saw Through Time, Trust the Process, Stars and Satellites. The Shire Part 2 is a song that just gives me goosebumps every time I hear the chorus. It's a pretty mellow track, but Glenn Morgan's vocals just go. They shine in that one. I guess one of the reasons that Legends of the Shires isn't my top favorite is just because being a double album, it doesn't have any downs, but it has its way ups, and it has its kind of, and I'm not a big fan of like the mid-tempo type stuff. And so there are some songs that really catch my attention and other ones that don't. And given the length of the CD, there's probably a couple too many of these in terms of how I really tune into the music for it to take the top spot. But I actually thought about it for a while. But it couldn't displace my top two. My second favorite Threshold disc, which to me personally is a surprise that it's my second favorite, because all along, up until probably I really started thinking about this hard to do this, I would have thought Hypothetical was my favorite Threshold disc of all time, because it was the first one I heard. I love almost every song on it. Memorable choruses. Mac does a spectacular job. I should also mention other people in the band like West and Groom and the drummer. I think his name is, I'll have to look it up, but I think his name is Johan. He's fun to watch, man. He's a monster back there on the kit. But Hypothetical from 2001 ends up being my second favorite disc. Opens with Light and Space. The Ravages of Time is, it's the long, one of two long tracks on this album that's just spectacular. The other one is Narcissus, which closes the CD. Great chorus there. Sheltering Sky, Ocean Bound, Long Way Home. I mean, how many bands have songs called Long Way Home that are some of their best songs ever? It seems like anytime a band writes a song called Carry On or Long Way Home, it's one of their best. Seventh Wonder has a great song called Long Way Home as well. But anyway, just so many good songs on Hypothetical. And for some reason, when I sat down to start picking out songs or looking at the CDs, thinking of, okay, what are the best songs on these CDs? How do the songs themselves line up? Which CDs have the largest number of songs that I would put on sort of a list of honor? It turns out that I like, even better than Hypothetical, Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning was released in 2007. This is the last CD that Mac performed on. It opens with Slipstream, which is a great opening track. When I say Threshold is like Iron Maiden, I don't mean that they sound like each other, but boy, do both of those bands know how to pick an opening track. Just a really heavy, fast-paced song to get you into it. But Slipstream is that track on Dead Reckoning. This Is Your Life is a great sing-along song. The Hollow is a good sit back and turn down the lights mellow tune. Pilot in the Sky of Dreams, oh my god, is that a good song. The first half is just kind of slow and wavy, and then it kicks in with some amazing drums and bass and just never lets you go from that point on. It's the nice, long, progressive song for this one. Safe to Fly and 1 Degree Down, which is another nice long track to close out that album. So as I started looking at the lists of songs on each of these albums, I mentioned this in one of my other 2 whole videos, that I treat Spotify as the modern day version of going and buying like a 90-minute cassette and then making a best of. I build Spotify playlists where I go through and pull out all my favorite songs from different bands. And when I looked at that playlist that I built for Threshold and how many songs came from Dead Reckoning compared to Hypothetical, and then sort of looking at them on a 1-to-1 contest, it turns out that I end up liking Dead Reckoning a hair better than Hypothetical. But they could be 1A and 1B. It's a toss-up. But I will give you Dead Reckoning from 2007 as my favorite Threshold CD. All right, if I take it in reverse order here, my favorite Threshold CD is Dead Reckoning, and then Hypothetical, Legends of the Shires, March of Progress, Subsurface, For the Journey, Psychedelicatessen, Critical Mass, Wounded Land, Clone, and Extinct Instinct. And if some of you feel I need to turn in my metal card because I like the latter-day stuff better than the earlier, rougher, probably more proggy stuff, Too bad. Given the amount of time that's gone by here, I don't think I'm going to try to rattle off a top 10 list of Threshold songs at the end of this video. I'll make that a separate video. That'll be the next one I do, maybe this afternoon, maybe later in the weekend, I don't know. But it'll come out next. So anyway, thanks for visiting my basement.